almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share. I mean, it feels like I'm at a firefighters conference and no one's allowed to speak about water.
Today we walk into this house with an iconic South African plant, the Alu Ferox. We must take the bitter with the sweet.
It is a matter that is under consideration, and all I would say is that watch this space.
Welcome to this week's episode of the SA Money Report. This financial podcast is brought to you by Fin24 and hosted by Deputy Editor Ahmed Arif.
Hello and welcome back to SA Money Report. I'm your host, Fin24 Deputy Editor Ahmed Arif. Each episode of the show consists of bite-sized samples of some of the week's biggest and most talked about business and financial news, ending with one of our reporters helping us peek behind the curtain and unpack one of our big stories. This week, we kick off with a return to our main story of last week. Eskom's never-ending nightmare of the Kusile power station. Fin24 reporter Lemiz Umarji spoke about how, while Eskom said the station was complete, it wasn't really that simple. I also mentioned that Eskom has lots of bad karma and that problems at Medupi would be a part of our lives for a long time. Literally a week to the day after the announcement, a generating unit at Medupi exploded. Luckily no one was injured, but Eskom said the explosion at Unit 4, which was caused by a significant amount of hydrogen in the generator, caused extensive damage. And anyone who knows their history knows the story of the Hindenburg disaster and knows also just how flammable hydrogen is. Eskom says there was a deviation of normal procedure in the process where they were trying to find the leak, and that the employees responsible were suspended pending an investigation. Hence, the Medupi story still continues. Moving on, Sabu Chabalala, the founder and CEO of technology group Adapt IT, resigned earlier this week. This comes on the back of a 3-month leave of absence to, in his words, attend to personal matters. That largely being the case filed against him by his spouse, who accused him of ordering an attack on her new partner, suspended eThekwini city manager Sipho Nzuza. Shabalala has denied all the allegations. However, that incident came at a crucial time for Adapt IT, which is dealing with a takeover bid from the Canada-based Volaris Group. Last month, Adapt IT said that a sufficient majority of shareholders voted in favor of the bid. And now, Shabalala is gone. Nzuza, who was hospitalized after that home invasion by a group of men, is also not without controversy. This was after his arrest and subsequent release on bail in relation to the 430 million rand fraud case involving the Durban solid waste tender. This case, as some of you might remember, also led to the fall of former eThekwini mayor Zandile Gumede. Moving along, we got Bank Zero, the digital bank backed by former FNB CEO turned angel investor and entrepreneur Michael Jordan, which finally launched this week. The newcomer is still adding customers through a waiting list, with potential users having to wait to get access to the bank's app. So you're not going to find it on the Play Store or Apple Store just yet. The bank has 0 monthly account management fees, no fees for bank notifications, and for buying prepaid vouchers, for debit orders, or for paying recipients in any other bank, or even pulling up a 3-month statement. As Fin24 financial services reporter Londiwe Buthelezi said in her piece on the bank this week, in the past 2.5 years, the South African banking landscape is going through the stiffest competition after decades of domination by the Big Four. So now with Time Bank and Discovery Bank and Sasfin's Hello Pesa and African Bank's My World banking account launching around the same time in 2019, time will tell if Bank Zero came to the party too late or if it can live up to the expectations of saving the best for last. Lastly, our main story of the week concerns SA's new finance minister. So generally, the markets and commentators were fairly optimistic about the appointment of what they say is the known entity, that is Enoch Godongwana. He's the head of the ANC's Economic Transformation Subcommittee in the NEC and is chairperson of the Development Bank of Southern Africa. To be fair, in financial circles, you could say that he's probably well known, especially given that we had to deal with the 4-day tenure of weekend special Des van Rooyen as finance minister once upon a time. So while Godongwana has been praised by those with sense for having the sensibilities to be the next finance minister, there's been a shadow lurking in the background called Kenyan Springs Investment 12. And no, this isn't the 12th installment of a franchise to compete with the Fast and Furious, and it's not a Durban holiday destination. Helping us to understand and unpack what it is actually is Fin24 investigative reporter Jan Cronje. Jan, can you briefly explain to us what exactly is Canyon Springs and how it relates to the new finance minister, his wife, and the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union, or SACTU?
Hi, Ahmed. Yeah, well, Canyon Springs Investments 12 was a company founded in the mid-2000s that was linked to our new finance minister, Enoch Godongwana. Now, the company is no longer active, so most of what we know about it now stems from media reports a decade ago, plus whatever company data is still around. But important is that it was 50% owned by a trust in the name of Godongwana and his wife. And on the question of why we're interested in the company at all, well, it was liquidated, which generally happens when a company is not able to pay its debts. And then there was a liquidation inquiry where Godongwana gave evidence.
So at that liquidation hearing, Godongwana said he would pay back whatever he owed. What money exactly did he owe in his personal capacity, and is that matter sorted now?
At that inquiry, and now these inquiries are normally held behind closed doors, but the media actually went to court to get access to it. They heard that Canyon Springs had lost about 100 million rand that was invested in it via a third party from funds that originated with the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union. Now, Godongwana, in his capacity as a key shareholder and former chairperson, I believe, had to give evidence specifically about these funds. And what he said at the time was that he was not aware that these funds had originated with SACTU. And he also said that basically he was not aware of what had happened with the funds. I believe his argument was that he'd been let down by other people. He at the time promised to pay back what he could, while saying that he was not directly responsible for the loss of the money.
And after all of this, what were the repercussions for him? I mean, did he carry on as normal, or what happened?
So in early 2012, when the inquiry was still ongoing, he actually resigned from his position as Deputy Minister of Economic Development. Now, at the time, he told the media that his resignation had nothing to do with the Canyon Funds debacle, but he was resigning so that he would have more time to focus on party political work in the ANC. At the time, he told the Mail and Guardian there was no link between his resignation and the inquiry. But he's since acknowledged to our colleague to whom he gave an interview last week, I believe it was Pule, that he did resign not to taint the department and to clear his name. So it's a different reason to the one that he gave a decade ago. Nothing much seems to have happened until 2012, when Godongwana and SACTU actually signed an agreement that governed what he would pay back. And SACTU's General Secretary, Andre Kriel, told me last week that he has since paid back the full amount that he owed, plus interest. Now, I don't know what that amount is and how it relates to the 100 million. Kriel wouldn't confirm what the amount was, and I haven't seen that agreement yet.
Ramaphosa surely appointed Godongwana knowing full well that there was this issue around Canyon Springs. And obviously now to Godongwana, it seems like it's baggage that he's gotten rid of, having paid that amount and seemingly to have atoned for it. So as you and Fin24 and the rest of News24 unpack this over time, do you think this is going to be the albatross around Godongwana's neck for the rest of his career as the head of Treasury? I mean, it doesn't bode well if someone who didn't know about the deals happening in a company that was half owned by his family trust is now in charge of the country's finances.
That's the most important question at the moment, I guess, Ahmed. And I think it depends on what is actually contained in the findings of the inquiry. Now, at the moment, the inquiry is privileged. That means that the public can't get access to it. But I believe at some stage it will likely be made public whether via the courts, who have to basically okay its release, as I understand it, or by someone leaking it to the media. It's even possible that some of the journalists working on it in 2012 have an old copy somewhere. But in any case, I can see a scenario where Godongwana is able to put this behind him, basically arguing that he did the noble thing at the time by resigning and then paying back the money, even though he wasn't the guilty party and had been misled by others. But we don't know what the findings say, and we also don't know what the agreement with SACPU says, and without these facts, rumors can start to take root. I think it's likely that Ramaphosa is confident that nothing bad is going to come out and will have checked Godongwana's history dating back more than a decade. But I think at the moment we'll have to wait and see, and hopefully the findings of the inquiry will be able to tell us one way or another.
Thanks, Jan, and thanks for giving us some of your time, yeah?
Thanks, Ahmed.
This brings our show to an end. The music in this episode is courtesy of Getty Images and Epidemic Sound. This week's installment was produced with the help of Kayleen Morgan. Thank you for listening.